So do you want to do an intro?
Let's do it.
Cut the rest out later.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that in a second. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Absurdum podcast. The podcast where we pick a particular topic and then we talk about it until it becomes absurd. I'm Alex Adams.
And I'm Dallas Kasabuski.
And we want to welcome you back, ladies and gentlemen, dedicated listeners. It's episode... Which episode is this? Should I have known this?
You should, and I forget. I think we're on 7. I'm going to quickly look it up, but
in the future...
The crazy thing, ladies and gentlemen, is we're actually making a podcast 1 month later than our last one, rather than 9 months later. So this is a pretty big deal. Yeah, this is episode 7.
Outstanding. And we're going to talk about something that I think everyone experiences, or everyone should experience in their spare time. And no, I'm not talking about that. Get your minds off of that. You know what you're thinking of. We're talking about hobbies, ladies and gentlemen. Hobbies. Hobbies are great.
What you do, why you get into them, what you get out of them, stuff like that. We wanted to talk a little bit more about those kinds of things and reflect on why we do them. Yeah. And we've had an episode on pants. I think we can have an episode on hobbies.
I think we started off. It's funny. Contrary to the name of our podcast, I think we're getting less and less absurd. I think we need to crank that up or something like that.
Oh, wait till we do next month's where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. That's an absurd one. So let's jump right into it. What makes a good hobby, Dallas? What are the components of a really satisfying? Because you have people. We're making a living. You've got family obligations. You've got work obligations. You got to take care of your body. Chores. It's not a chore. It's not a job. It's something that you do that
I think
you really like.
I think the number one quality of a hobby is that you enjoy it, right? I mean, that's
reasonable.
What distincts it. That's what differentiates it from a job
or a bad habit.
Or a bad habit, exactly. Well, I mean, you can enjoy a bad habit, but you might recognize it as a bad habit.
That's a pretty good distinction.
Top level, you enjoy it, and then I guess that other people don't. Like, it doesn't interfere with other people's lives.
Yeah, crime is not a hobby, ladies and gentlemen. As much as you think...
Yeah, it's an art form.
I steal bikes from my spare time. It's great.
Yeah. So you enjoy it, and it doesn't interfere with other people's lives. Obviously can't interfere with your life, where it becomes...
an obsession.
Or there are people who start off with a hobby and then it becomes their career or their job.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we can get into that later.
Absolutely. I can speak to that a little bit. I think that additionally for it to be something that you like, I think also it requires some kind of skill or efforting. I think that hobbies can't just be, watching TV could potentially be a hobby. But I think that would be a distinction between, like, let's say somebody who is really following a show deeply, I would consider that as a hobby. Like, if someone has got, I'm not a big TV watcher myself, but you've got these serialized shows, like, for instance, like, when Breaking Bad was big, I'm going to date this podcast, I don't know, like, Lost.
When Ben-Hur came out.
When Dallas, the TV show Dallas, when that guy got shot. Who shot JR? Oh, geez. Yeah. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. It should require some effort. Bowling, golfing, darts. Where you get you dunk the toilet paper in glue, paper mache. It should require some sort of skill set that you get better at as time goes on.
Okay, now I would mostly agree with you, but because I'm a contrarian,
yes.
What about reading?
Ooh, now would you suggest that you don't get better at reading as time goes on?
I don't know. I guess technically you do, but there's kind of a difference in how much you pay attention as well. Because if you're reading like something, let's say juicy, and you're like flipping through it, but you don't retain it, does that qualify as a hobby in the same way that like reading something? I don't know. I'm not even talking about like book report level of reading, because again, that wouldn't be a hobby. That would be more like a chore or work.
Task.
But I mean, I know people who read like long fantasy series and made like family trees of the different characters and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
So that's the most like functional hobbyization that I can think of that's still relaxed. You know, it's weird.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna trample all over my earlier argument with one hobby that I enjoy, which doesn't really take any skill at all, which is I give blood. One of the things I do in my spare time is I give blood, and the reason why I do that, one is I have high iron, just as my body produces a lot of iron. I don't know how, I might have a high iron diet, but every time I give blood, they're just like, whoa, I'm glad you're here, because damn, that iron. So there's a benefit to me, but I also feel really good about it because I feel like I'm helping people. I feel like it's a form of charity that goes beyond money and goes beyond my time. Also, you know, on the sidebar, it's a really lazy way to feel really good about yourself as a giver to society, because I can keep all my money and I'm getting sort of a medical benefit too, because there's some benefits to giving blood, and I can save a life. But then again, so like I said, a hobby is something that you can have a skill on. We're talking about reading, talking about giving blood. So maybe there's something else. Maybe there's other salient features about hobbies.
Yeah, it's tough, I guess. And the thing is that a lot of it is subjective, because what you might consider a hobby, others may hate entirely.
Absolutely.
I mean, back in high school, I was so bored one summer that I started doing calculus, and it was fun for me.
It's the most Dallas thing I've ever heard all year.
Yeah, but other people are like, "What? That's crazy!" But I was out with my family, and we lived pretty rurally, and I didn't feel like running through the forest, so I was doing calculus, and yeah. So I don't know. I think it might be difficult. I think with a hobby, you can pretty much. It's one of those things where it may be difficult to define, but you just know it.
Yeah.
And I do think that enjoying it is a primary aspect of it. I mean, even if you, I don't know, if you have a hobby which is to paint, but you suck at painting, and when you do it too much, you feel upset, I still think it's a hobby, because you're enjoying it, at least in the beginning, even if part of the hobby is self-improvement. Because I think a lot of hobbies are not about self-improvement. I mean, maybe not on the conscious level.
I wanted to speak to that, because that's a really important point that reminds me of. So Mike Rowe, who is he hosted Dirty Jobs for a while. I think he's still doing that show. If you're familiar, if you've ever seen the show Dirty Jobs, and he's sort of this. He's this like sort of vanguard for this new revolution of work ethic in America. He's really trying to get people, because I know like there's a lot of tension with and I think that's actually, it's falling by the wayside, like the millennial generation being these like sort of lazy, self-entitled people. And we are both, you know, Dallas and I are both, you know, younger people. We're not in our 50s or 60s yet. You know, hopefully I can get there. But in any case, he talks about hobbies and work and the importance of having a job, and not necessarily and sort of contrary to the classic idea of doing what you love. But he talks about sometimes if you turn your hobby into your job, into your career, that can actually be a huge problem, because just because you like something doesn't mean you're good at it. And you can really be passionate about painting, or really, really passionate about sculpture or metallurgy, but not be able to perform at a world-class level, or even at a level where you can get a livable wage. And additional to that, you can have a really, really juicy, satisfying hobby, but when you turn it into your job, you become there's burnout, or you become bored of it. There was a story of this guy who really liked coding. He loved to write in Java, or these codes, and he decided, I'm going to turn my hobby into a career. And then he just started working on these projects that were like demanded of him, and his boss were like, you got to write this code, you got to write this code, and he started hating it, and he just like, it was like a terrible life decision for him.
I feel like we're doing some own self-promoting now, because we kind of talked about this last time in our stress versus relaxation. Where,
if you haven't listened to that yet, please go back and listen to episode 6, because that's also a really good episode. Like, comment, and subscribe.
But I think that's very true. I think a lot of us get into our hobbies not because we're seeking to I think most people get into the hobby because it's fun and it's something different. Maybe it's exciting. Maybe it's relaxing. You know, there's a whole spectrum of it. I find people like you and I, we probably take on more of that. We may get into something because it's fun, and then we may enjoy it a lot more because it has other aspects. But I think we take it's weird how we take things more seriously than others, I think. But we're also completely ridiculous about them. So let's talk about that. Let's get into some hobbies. Okay. So what are you up to, Alex, other than making podcasts? What are you up to these days?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with a modern hobby, one that I just got into. I just picked up the saxophone. So music is a big part of my life, as it is for like many, many other people. I love listening to music. I love curating playlists. I know a lot of my friends kind of look at me with a sideways glance. I think, listeners, if you're out there, props to the people who spend their spare time curating playlists, because that's one of my hobbies where I'll listen through albums, and I've got a couple of playlists that are mood relative, and I think of a song where I'm like, ooh, this makes me feel, this is a slow but hopeful song, and this is a song I'd really like to walk home to after a hard day of work. So I have a walking home from work playlist. Or like, oh, you know, this song's really, really energetic, but it's not the kind of thing that I really want to be like actually exercising to. So I've got a walking to the gym playlist. So one of my hobbies outside of that is curating playlists of music. But the saxophone, I picked up the violin a couple years ago. I wanted to play a specific song. It was actually Bach's Allegro Sonata No. 2 in A minor. I didn't end up being able to learn it. I still might someday, but the skill curve was super, super huge. And then I thought to myself, there's a lot of songs that cross a lot of genres that have the saxophone in it that I think like I would really like to be able to embody or just like jam out on. So I was able to find an old saxophone from a family member of mine, had an old one that was like rusting down in the basement, got that refurbished, and when I have a spare moment, I'm learning the saxophone, and it's not something that I know. I don't think I'm going to be on a concert level or any kind of like, public presentation, but privately making a note, jamming out and just sort of goofing off on the saxophone or just learning simple chords right now, that's giving me a lot of pleasure.
So besides from the enjoyment that you get out of it, have you found, like, has it affected you in other ways? Have you learned anything? Do you go back to your curated playlists and you hear a saxophone and you're like, oh man, how did he do that? Or, oh, I think I know how, like, that's interesting, how he trilled that note or whatever.
Absolutely. One of the first songs that I heard, or rather one of the first artists that I heard, was Masudo Honda from he's the alto sax player from the band called the Seatbelts. And if ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever heard of a little anime called Cowboy Bebop, they did the soundtrack for Cowboy Bebop, and that has some really outstanding sax licks in there. And I'm like, I want to play like this guy. This is the style, because up until then I'm like, yeah, saxophone's pretty cool, but I listened to that particular artist play that, I'm like, ooh yeah. I think above and beyond just a general appreciation for like sax play, like Art Pepper's another great saxophone player. He's a jazz sax player. Just sort of like the lesson of what it takes to learn a skill like that. And this even goes back to violin, where there's you have to create perpendicular lines with the bow and the string, and with the saxophone, even your embouchure, your mouth position on the reed has to be a certain way, and just learning that lesson of just what it takes to just have that, be willing to just repeat and have that repetition to build that skill slowly. Which is sort of different from just your general having fun at a hobby, but it's giving me an important life lesson of anything that if I'm looking at people that are playing at this high level, if I want to get that, if I want to emulate that or be that, you really got to put in the work, and you got to put in the work daily and love the process. Because if you're not loving the process, I feel like people can go through a lot of hobbies with an end goal in mind. I'm sure, listeners, if you have children, You probably might have like a karate gi right beside a unicycle, right beside like, several instruments where your kid has gone through iterations of different hobbies of wanting to do stuff. And exposure is good, but wanting to enjoy the process of getting good at an instrument or getting good at a hobby or collecting and just having a few things that you're collecting yet, you need to be able to enjoy that too, or else you're just, you're looking at that goal and then you're hating what you're doing now, and that's not fun, and then you're going to drop the hobby.
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of people, when they find a hobby that they enjoy, I think they're generally going to enjoy it for a long time, and obviously you want to get good at it, and it's a weird balance where I think if you have a hobby, you're gonna do that hobby for a while. You don't want to suck at it because that's negative. You want a positive experience out of it, but you may not want to turn pro because that's a negative experience as well. Pressure, too much time, too much effort. So it's this weird balance that people might not even think about, where it's like, well, I have to be good enough that I enjoy it, but not so good that I feel like I have to work at it. And I feel that like when you talked about exposure, it's not something that I've really thought about, but I suppose a lot of people get into hobbies because it's a casual way of exposing yourself to different things in life. I guess I don't know if like trying different things is a hobby, but I'm sure there are people out there who do that, where it's like, well, this week I'm, going to learn skiing, and this week I'm going to learn to fire a gun at a gun range. And I guess trying new things could itself be a hobby. And in that case, you're, again, people aren't thinking as seriously about it. They're just like, I want to do something cool. But maybe for them, the goal is to learn new skills, meet new people, and maybe become more flexible in their in their approach to life. I'm speaking entirely hypothetically, mind you, because I am not a person who jumps from hobby to hobby. I stare at it from the outside and I kind of study it, and then I review it, and then if I decide to do it, then I keep like a probationary period that's pretty long, and then I go, yeah, I enjoy this. I'm going to keep getting into that, which leads me to talking about my latest hobby.
Please.
Which is well, I guess I have to talk about two, but Excellent. I'll come back to it. Streaming video games. I've been making. I have to warn you, listeners. A lot of this podcast is just going to be me plugging you with like the different things that I do.
What's the name of your channel, Dallas?
So I made a YouTube channel called Embrace Destiny, and I also have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Kaz_PhD, where
come in and subscribe.
Okay. Video games, we can come back to that in a bit, but I've been playing them for a while, and I've been really enjoying Bungie's video game Destiny. And I've been enjoying it so much that I've even watched videos of other people playing and commenting on the game or the gameplay or stuff like this. And now you, Alex, you have a bit of experience making like streaming video games and stuff.
Absolutely.
And we can come back to that. So I was encouraged by that experience. You guys made a product that's funny. It's interesting to me, at least. And I was like, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could get more out of my gaming experience if I was to make something. So I did some research, and I learned that like the pros have like, they have their console next to their computer, and they have like a whole studio, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I learned that a very easy way to do it was to use Twitch, because my console can send my voice and my gameplay to Twitch, and if I want to retrieve it and edit it later, I can, or I can leave it there. So I've been treating this as a kind of almost as an incremental like experiment or learning process. The whole motivation for getting into it on the surface was I enjoy Destiny. Maybe I'd enjoy it more if I made something with it. But underlying that, what's been pushing me to make regular content has been that I want to improve my audio visual making skills. I always avoided all of that. Like when it came to like high school projects or when it came to like university projects. During my time in my master's degree, I was in a team project, and one aspect of it was making like a poster and making a video and making a cover page. And I told my team, I said, I'm not doing any of that.
No graphic design for you.
I will write an extra chapter of work. I will do the presentation, but I will not make it because I just was not good at it and I was not interested in it. But I've been wanting to learn, and I find with me, and we can come back to this later, I find that I need a hobby to trick me into regularly working on something that I want to pursue. Most people are like, I just want to go play basketball. And with me, it's like, well, I want to improve how I edit audio and video. Well, I can't just give myself like some work to do because then I won't like it. Yeah. It's like, okay, I want to make a video of me playing Destiny with commentary on it. How do you do that? You have to have audio video skills. So
that's great. You gamify it.
So that's it. And I've been enjoying it. I've been incrementally increasing its quality. I mean, the first video I did, my audio was garbled and it was misaligned in time, and there was it was bad. And it's slowly improving out of it. So yeah, that's we're actually, just to finish this final plug, I'm actually streaming this Sunday.
That will be Sunday, February 19th. At what time?
2 p.m. Eastern.
Alrighty.
Over on, like I said, twitch.tv/Kaz_PhD. A bunch of us are actually going to do a raid, a really hard story mission in Destiny together.
Nice.
And so I wanted to let you know that, Alex, because you had dropped by in our previous one, but if you have time, we're going to be doing that again this Sunday.
My girlfriend's pushing me to get a PS4 for a variety of games. By the way, this is total sidebar, but you should check out the game For Honor. I think it's coming out for the Xbox One too. It's the Xbox 12, the Xbox One as well. But I wanted to speak about using. I wanted to speak to that also, and to speak to the video game creation. Video games as a hobby. Playing video games can be a hobby. Playing specific video games can be a hobby. Playing video games with friends can be a hobby. I think that it's in the same way as like music can lead into so many different hobbies. Where, like, for instance, there's this old Xbox 360 game that I really love called Dead Rising, and I think I just I've played it so much. I've played for hundreds of hours. I just know all the details. So going back into that game, it gives me something akin to like a really comforting feeling where it's like I know the details. I know the world. And that you can get that, other people can get that from specific games. Playing games really fast can be a hobby. Speed running is a huge hobby. And streaming games can be a hobby. And those can all sort of mix together. I had last year, and it's still going on, but I have, with a friend of mine, I have a YouTube channel called Team Lunch Break, where we created video game content. We did Let's Plays and stuff like that. That was really outstanding. But to speak...
Which you should pick up again, by the way.
Yes.
Because they're funny. They're really entertaining.
We gotta get I gotta get my buddy down, Mr. Michael McKenna, down up here to the core, so we can play more of that. But the speaking alongside making sort of gamifying the acquisition of a skill set, which can be a hobby. You could be for instance, the reason why I started giving blood was initially because I would pass out every time I got a needle. Every time, and I'm 6'4", I'm a big guy, and it was very amusing because you'd have these nurses, like a 5'4" nurse, and they would stick me with the needle, and I knew it was coming, and it didn't necessarily hurt, but it was just the psychological thing where the needle would be in me, and I wouldn't be able to control my thought process, and it would be like, okay, the needle's in me, all right, that's fine, get my mind away for a minute, okay, it's been a while, okay, get it out, and it would just pass out. So in order to sort of quell that or get over that internal blockage, I decided to give blood. Funny enough, funny story, the first time I gave blood, they took 50 milliliters out of me, and then I passed out again. And then the blood services guy was like, listen, like this goes on your permanent blood donation record. If you pass out a second time, you're banned for life. And they don't kid around with that because it's a health issue and they don't want to, this is a legal issue. So every time I give blood, I am on the edge because I know, and I have to like tense my legs up and everything like that because if I pass out again, I am done. And they're always asking me, like, why are you so tense? Relax. I'm like, if I relax, I'm going to pass out and I'm banned for life. So I got to keep that going.
So have you found any improvement to your reaction to needles? Or is it more like, yeah, I know it's there, but I still feel freaked out about it every time?
I listen to hardcore rap while I'm getting the needle really, really loudly, and then I have to also tense my legs. I feel like I've built some tools up,
So in this case, X isn't going to give it to you; it's going to take it from you, it being your blood.
Oh, y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here. Sorry, one more point.
Yeah.
So you spoke about wanting to increase your skills in audiovisual content creation and graphic design, and you started streaming as a way to do that. I am a big fan of public speaking, and I have a few outlets for that. But one thing that is sort of hedging into my language learning, because I'm learning Arabic as well, is there's this website called Rhinospike, where if you're a language learner, and for the listeners out there, if you're language learners, I want you to check out this book called Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner. It's an incredible book about language learning, and he talks about Rhinospike, where what you can do is, let's say if you speak English and you're learning another language, you can go and find other English language learners, and they post little articles that you transcribe into English and then upload audio of it. So like, let's say someone's a Spanish speaker learning English, and they'll put like a little forum post to say, oh, like, can a native English speaker please read this little blurb for me so I know how it sounds? So for some reason, and I should be actually learning the language that I'm learning, but instead I'm going on to Rhinospike and I'm transcribing for hours, just like transcribing English language text to be like, we should be police officers. Should we be police officers? On Tuesday, I'm going to go to the library. And it gives me such a thrill because I'm getting comments and stuff like that. But one of the other side effects is that I'm using their proprietary audio upload software, which means if I'm not using Audacity or any program where I can use multiple takes, I have to do it perfectly in one shot. And what I've been doing is I've been going into articles blind and just hitting record and starting to scroll and seeing how good I am at reading ahead and just with proper enunciation and not missing a single beat, trying to get that whole and then I'm just 400 or 500 word articles, trying to nail that. And as a result, I'm getting a lot better at guided reading and sort of reading out loud.
I just imagine somebody's like, oh, good, somebody answered my message. It's, like a daily grocery list. And they click play, and it's you, and it's like apple, banana, cucumber. Fuck, that didn't say cucumber. It said avocado. Damn, now I want avocados. Hold on a second. No, where's the playback button? Oh, there isn't one. Potatoes. Or even worse, just get into the macabre where it's like apple, banana, and then you just hear get out of my house! What are you doing in here?
Oh man, have you total sidebar? Do you ever see that YouTube channel of that Russian dude who would just meditate in front of a camera and smile for 4 hours at a time?
No,
there's a dude who just sits in front of a camera, and it's some sort of meditative spiritual thing, but he's just sitting in front of a camera and he just smiles at the camera for hours at a time. He just uploads these videos. There's this one stream, I kid you not, where someone tries to break into his house, and you hear smashing at the door, and the door opens, and there's a criminal that comes into the door and sees this, and is behind the camera. So he's basically standing stone statue looking at a camera smiling, and the criminal just backs out of his house, out of the frame, and leaves. Oh my god. That's a deterrent. That's a deterrent.
If someone's prepared for you and they're just smiling at their camera,
it's brutal. It's brutal.
Oh man, Oh, a funny story to you for you about needles. When
Yeah.
I was, I don't know, a child, I can't remember how old I was, very young. I was very afraid of needles.
Yes.
And my mom actually had to hold me down
Woo!
when I was getting needles, whatever. And apparently, like, both arms and both legs pulled like behind my back or held restrained, held down. And apparently at one point I wrestled my arm out of my mom's grasp, grabbed the needle, and for some reason, I don't know how old I was like very young.
Yeah.
I didn't pull the needle out. I bent the needle. And then they managed to pull it out, and it didn't break. It didn't break at all. It was completely 90 degrees pulled out of my body.
That's ghastly. For those of you who are afraid of needles, retroactive warning.
Welcome to the nightmare. Yeah.
We have such things to show you.
So, yeah, since then, I don't know, I'm not afraid of needles anymore. They just hurt and they're annoying, but
yes.
But yeah, I wanted to share that you're not alone. There's a lot of people who don't. I don't know.
It's
There's
a
so
natural
many people
fear.
who don't like it. It's very, very unnatural, I guess, right? It's like, here, just sit here and let me puncture you. It's like, no, that's the opposite of what I've evolved to do.
It's not a wound. Like there's something. Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, it's bizarre. Like you scrape your knee, and I know that there's more pain in a scraped knee than a needle, objectively. Like, but it's the psychological attribution. You're like, yeah, there's something, blood's coming out of you. It's like, ugh. Or something going into you. Yikes.
Yeah. So yeah, back into hobbies.
Yeah, hobbies. We're not off the rails.
Yeah, off the rails. We need like a soundboard, like.
No, just get the air horn. This is out of Absurdum, people. We're supposed to go off the rails. This is the situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been so I'll close the loop on the streaming for a moment. In a moment, but I've been really enjoying it. I've been improving on it. I've been using some free software like Audacity and like Windows Movie Maker and stuff like that. And it's been good. I've been learning to add effects and slow things down. And a couple of the recent, I'm actually hitting kind of not a plateau, but I'm hitting the next step.
Yes.
I think. When you stream your stuff to Twitch, it's reliant on your internet connection, and sometimes there can be gaps. So some of my videos have momentary audio gaps or video gaps in them because of this problem. And I was discussing it with a friend, and he's like, "Oh, I wish you could fix that." I'm like, "I can't. Like, there's no amount of editing that I could do unless I want to fill the frames with like something else." So I was looking at it, I'm like, well, maybe if this is a hobby I'm quote unquote more serious about, if I'm going to keep doing this, then maybe I should actually get some equipment to do it. And then I thought, I don't know, like it's a hobby. I don't want to commit resources to that. So I looked it up, and there's a couple of video capturing or hardware that I'm basically giving it a couple of months. Destiny is out right now. Destiny 2 is set to come out in the fall. My birthday is somewhere in the middle there. So if I decide I'm going to keep making these videos and keep improving, then I might end up committing to getting some hardware. And I'm taking it very slow. I don't want to dive into it because I'm afraid that I'll lose interest if I run into too many obstacles. But I find if I run into just enough of a challenge that I can overcome it, then it inspires me to keep doing it. So that's been interesting.
That's a really key point, and I think I might have asked this to you before, and the listeners too. Have you ever read a book called Flow: The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Csikszentmihalyi?
No, I have not, but you've mentioned it, I think.
I think it's this eponymous perennial idea of flow states, and you just hit the nail on the head right there, where in a nutshell, he says that the reason why an experience is really like a peak experience or just a really fun experience is when it's challenging enough that your resources, like your personal character, is taxed. Like you're working hard, you're really trying to outthink a problem, and you're invested, but it's not too hard that it's like insurmountable. So like if you could look at it like a scope, on one end there's apathy because it's too hard, like what the heck ever, I'll never be able to I don't know, there's some things that I'll never be able to do. I don't know, like powerlifting, I don't think I'll ever be a professional powerlifter, or like CrossFit or whatever. And then on the other side it's like, well, playing with Legos, like I can just do it. It's too easy. I'm just gonna put it together. So, but having that peak, and I'll give you an example. This was a bigger hobby to me a couple years ago, but I really got into the board game Go, which is this board game played with black and white stones. It's pretty much like chess. And you have to like surround your opponent, and you for people interested, you can just Google it and see what it's about. But I have these vivid memories of when I was really into it. I think I was in it. I played about like 50 hours and like a couple hundred games, and I was just like this one game where I really had to outthink my opponent, and it was like every move was like so. I'm sure like Josh Waitzkin could put this in more elegant terms, but like I was just like my brain was working so hard, and I was like really trying to make it happen. And if my opponent was like matched with me, and it was so much fun because my opponent was just hard enough that I was stretching myself into a new mode of evolution, but it wasn't too hard that I was getting overwhelmed, and it wasn't too easy that it was just like a cakewalk. And I feel like most hobbies, that's where the golden nugget is. You want, and even something like collection, like if you're a collector of stamps or a collector of antique Coke bottles or plastic chairs, and there are collectors of antique plastic chairs out there, ladies and gentlemen. But if you're like looking for that next find or that next deal, or if you're like really polishing your streaming abilities, getting to a place where the challenge is just challenging enough where you are forced to stretch, that's where things can get really interesting, and that's where you're going to have a lot of fun in your hobby, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's no fun to be like, yeah, I started becoming a collector of antique plastic chairs because I found 100 of them in my garage.
100 of the most rare ones.
It's like, well, that's a great story. No, it's always like, oh, it was on eBay and somebody tried to outbid me, and they did, but it turned out it was my friend who gave it to me as a gift, and stuff.
Oh,
like
that would be adorable! Holy crap!
So another hobby that you and I both share, we're actually going to save it for a later video, but I think we can miniaturize.
We'll give them a hint.
And talk
we'll
about
give
it
them
right
a little taste.
Yeah, we'll give them a little teaser trailer. Is Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
So before we get into
the tabletop game.
Exactly, not the movie with Tom Hanks. There's not really a hobby surrounding
Tom Hanks?
Yeah, Tom Hanks did a movie like Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know, Mazes and Monsters, something like that. And it is the movie that a lot of conservatives or whatever point to as Dungeons and Dragons is the devil, or like summons the devil.
No, that's not the one with John Leguizamo where he sinks into the oatmeal that's painted to look like a carpet, right?
I don't remember. I listen to a couple of podcasts, and they sometimes take questions at the end, and some of the questions deal with like, my parents don't want me to play, and they always make the joke like maybe they watched that movie. So now that we've given the audience a real scare about Dungeons and Dragons,
it's very scary.
I'm going to do a very quick synopsis of what I think it is, and then we can jump into how we got into it and get out of it. I think that would be good for a short. So Dungeons and Dragons. Forget everything you ever heard about it. Forget everything you know. Dungeons and Dragons is an interactive storytelling game. What it is one person in your group is called the Game Master or the Dungeon Master, and
or GM for short.
And they are the ones who have a story to tell, and they control they're also like a referee. So they have a story to tell, and they start telling the story like around a campfire. And you have a few other people who are more than just listeners of the story. They are characters within the story. So imagine you're telling a ghost story, and you're like, oh, and then you go into a haunted house. As a player in Dungeons & Dragons, you don't have to say, well, then what happened? You can say, well, I go... I bring out my flashlight. Yeah. And, and then he's like, oh, okay, you see lots of cobwebs and a fallen over bookcase. And, well, I search behind the bookcase. There you find the key to the treasure that you've been looking for. But on the other side of the room, a skeleton appears or whatever. So it's an interactive storytelling experience. And that's all D&D is. There are a lot of rules around it, but rules are made to familiarize everyone in whatever setting you have. Dungeons and Dragons or games like it can be medieval or fantasy or science fiction or whatever. and the rules are to help you have consistency. So if you've ever tried to play a game as a child, like laser tag, and you're like, no, I shot you, and it's like, well, the thing didn't go off, you have to have some rules to kind of agree upon how everything works. So anyway, Alex,
yes.
How long have you been playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, geez. I think maybe about like 12 years, something like that, around 10, 12 years.
And how did you get into it?
So initially, I understood, I recognized the pop culture appeal of Dungeons and Dragons. There was always this sort of mystery surrounding the game to me, because I would see it portrayed in a variety of shows. I remember specifically, actually, an episode of Dexter's Lab, talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and like I think the Weekenders and all of these cartoons I used to watch in like the mid-aughts and the late 90s. And I was always like, what is this mysterious game? I never really saw rules attributed to it. I always just saw this guy sitting beside this little 3-paneled cardboard stand-up thing, and then people rolling dice, and then more often than not, the show would descend into this like fantasy panoply of, where the characters would be dressed up. Reboot, I think, does a really good rendition of that. And then like there'd be a wizard guy and a warrior guy and a rogue guy, and like they would be in this fantasy world that had nothing to do with the game. It was all imaginative. I'm like, wow, what is this game? Like, what are the rules? How do I play? I would go to like the Toys R Us and be like, can I get a copy of the Dungeons and Dragons? And they're like, we don't sell it. And I'm like, well, what is it? What do you do? All I see is a bunch of books. Where's the board and the board game?
Find a stranger on the street, Alex, and ask them for candy. That's how it works.
I was about to get into the into the chick tract, like, demonic seance. But eventually I ran into a group of people, a very friendly group of friends that I still talk to today, where they were like, hey, do you want to play some Dungeons and Dragons? And I'm like, you damn well better believe I want to get in on this. And lo and behold, it was completely different from what I had conceived, because there was no board. I mean, there was a board, but the board was so much less meaningful than what was actually going on. And what was actually going on was what was going on in all our heads. And to be frank, initially, I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird. I don't know if I like this a lot. This is we're just kind of like, someone would just say a thing and be like, well, I do this. And like, well, okay, you imagine that it goes like this. And this sort of like shared reverie experience of imaginative thinking. But then the more I got into it, the more I realized that and this is, I'm going to say this in the next episode, so I'll cut this really short. But it just became more and more vivid to me. And like the memories that I have about game experiences in D&D are like magnitude greater in vividity and emotional pathos rather, than, let's say, something that I did in a video game. So like something I did in a video game, oh, you killed this dragon, the dragon was huge and wow, but like the experience in Dungeons & Dragons where you're with this shared narrative with all your friends or strangers, and then doing this thing and having it described in such detail, it really creates a lasting impact. So that was the appeal, the sort of hook for me. And ever since then, I've been, enmeshed in creating stories and sharing stories and in different iterations, and it's been like that until modern day.
Nice. Well, for me, I probably started playing Dungeons and Dragons around the same time you did, with the same group of people that you did. I find it kind of weird to loop video games and Dungeons and Dragons together for a moment. I have this weird gap where there's a certain significant amount of things that I just didn't know about or do as a child, that most other people my own age now who grew up in my generation experienced. So, yes. Like for video games, I played Mario at like my uncle's house. I played like Sonic at my other uncle's house. And then I didn't play a lot of video games. And then when I got into university, I played a lot of video games. With Dungeons & Dragons, it's kind of weird to me to think about that I didn't really hear about it until university. And It's weird to me because I read fantasy. I mean, I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was very big into all this kind of genre, but I hadn't even heard of the game. But again, some friends wanted to play this game. I couldn't because I was very busy, but I had just enough time that I could kind of watch. Sometimes I would they would start playing and I would work. I'd finish my work a little bit early. I'd go and I'd watch the game and I would sometimes influence the game. I'd be like, hey, you should use your magic rope. Oh, hey, don't forget there's a dragon behind that door or whatever. So I got into it for similar reasons. Friends, wanting to play an adventure, and I was very versed in the mythos. I knew all about Dungeons and Dragons and hobbits and elves and dwarves, and that's most commonly where the setting is that kind of medieval fantasy, right? So that got me into it. What I've taken out of it is far more, and again, we're going to talk about it probably next month, but I'm going to sidetrack from Dungeons and Dragons into other hobbies that I've only gotten into because of Dungeons and Dragons.
Tell me about it.
So when I was in high school, there were a lot of people writing stories. They would always write stories, and I had a hard time fathoming writing stories, which I found weird. I loved to read fiction, but I hated to write fiction.
Yes.
I just couldn't do it. The only thing I ever wrote were... I did write poetry, and I mostly, if I wrote anything, it was a journal. It was a reflection of thoughts. For some reason, that was the only thing I wanted to do when I wrote, was to write my perspective on things. I never wanted to write, like, any kind of fiction.
Yes.
And then I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and in one of the games, I wanted my character to keep a journal of what was happening. There was a lot happening, and it seemed to me appropriate that my character would chronicle this. So I started keeping a journal, and first it was just notes. It was like, found 50 gold in this cave, mysterious stranger says this cryptic phrase, and it started evolving where I've actually written, I expanded them into full journal accounts written in first person perspective from that character's perspective, and it's become more than that. I finished playing that specific game years ago, and I started chronicling the next Dungeons and Dragons game I played, and I started making apocryphal stories based on the characters from the first game that had nothing, for the longest time, any fictional writing was still based in the quote-unquote reality of me quote-unquote experiencing it. My character experienced this mission, so I wrote about it, and it was like my cheat code. It was like, oh, Dallas's brain can only write things that are true. Okay, I will only write the story that is true because my character did it.
The perfect life hack.
Bypassing that mental block, right?
Yes.
And now I've even started writing stories based on those characters, but there's no campaign around it. There's no, we never played that D&D adventure. It's just, I just know those characters and the setting so well. I'm like, well, that will probably happen.
Which I might add was the progenitor of many actual full-length fiction novels, which resulted I think Drizzt and a lot of famous novels came directly out of apocryphal Dungeons and Dragons campaign stories.
Yeah, all the was it Forgotten Realms and Neverwinter Nights?
Yeah, or even inspired by. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one hobby that I grew. Dungeons and Dragons is a gateway hobby, and it has made me better and more comfortable with writing. The other one is drawing. Now, for anybody who knows me, again, like I said earlier in this recording, I avoided drawing. I avoid any kind of graphics, stuff like that. When I was younger, when I was really young, I was good at it, and then I stopped doing it, and then I was terrible at it, and I was so bad, and I felt so bad that if I started to draw anything, and I mean anything, you asked me to draw you anything other than a direction, how do you get to the store or whatever, I would shut down. And I'm not like that with anything. If I don't know how to do something, I try to learn, I get better. I'm very lucky that I don't suffer from anxiety most of the time. But when it came to drawing, I would just shut down and I would avoid it. I would treat it like fire. People are like, hey, can you, what did that symbol look like? Can you draw it? Nope, not going to do it. You can't convince me to do it. And recently playing in a Dungeons and Dragons game, my character is a wizard. He has a spell book. And I've always loved when you see notebooks from Da Vinci or other people. Yeah. And they're just full of not only text, but drawings, diagrams, schematics. And despite being an engineer, I haven't had to do a lot of drawings or schematics. And if I do, I can just do it on the computer and it's all done for me. But
Yes.
so I was like, I need to improve on this skill. It's important for my character, and it's important for me to be able to at least draw simple things without just going into cardiac arrest. So I started drawing things for my character, and whenever I run into the mental roadblock of you can't draw that simple thing, you suck, I remember that my character is in this game. Our characters are very young, so I kind of use that as my excuse. Like, it's okay that it's crap. My character is just learning to draw, which is an excuse for it's okay that it's not that great. I'm just learning to draw.
That's fascinating psychologically.
So so Dungeons and Dragons has helped me get over that roadblock of drawing, and to this day, it is the only reason I draw. I mean,
wow.
I haven't had other reasons to draw, but I'm at least more open to the idea. My girlfriend is an artist, and she said, "Oh, let's draw or let's paint."
Great artist.
Which is,
I've seen some of those concept pieces. I want to print out that one, the skull one.
Oh,
the
nice.
Skeleton.
Yeah. She'll. I'll put a link in the description below. But her stuff is fantastic, and she just comes up with it like out of nowhere. But if she had she asked me like a year ago if I wanted to draw with her, and I just laughed and like walked away because that's torture. Like, hey, Venus Williams, want to play tennis? Like, no, you never do that. No. But right, and if she asked you to play tennis, you'd be like, why? But now I'm at least more open to the idea of doing that, and it's thanks to Dungeons and Dragons. So
incredible.
We'll talk about that more next month. I'm excited to get into that. You and I have played together for years, and we really get a lot out of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So I think that just about wraps up what we have elaborated on with Hobbies. I think the message that we can all walk away from is try new stuff, expose yourself to stuff, keep it challenging, keep it fun, make sure it's fun based and you find it fun, and just keep plugging. And pretty much sometimes one hobby, even though that hobby is not your shtick, not your style, it might lead to something that can improve your life in other ways.
Definitely. I think the whole point of hobbies, despite us talking about how seriously we take them, is that they are not serious things. And maybe you make it a serious part of your life, as serious as any form of relaxation or pastime can be. But the great thing about a hobby is that you can change it. You can stop doing it. You can move on to something else. And that gives you a freedom to explore more things than perhaps even your career can. So
excellently put.
Yeah, so that's it from my side. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or feedback, feel free to leave them down below. We would love to hear from you. We're always trying to come up with new ideas.
And we will listen. If you have an idea, we will talk about it until it becomes absurd. Don't feel like you won't be listened to, because you will.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not too, I would say, as long as it's not too graphic.
There you go.
And as long as it's not too personal, although you and I are a little bit more open about that sort of thing. So feel free to test us. Feel free to give us a topic you think we might not want to talk about, and we'll see if we can fit it into our program. So
outstanding.
Yeah.
This has been Ad Absurdum. We will see you next time. Have a great day.